Okay, we're starting a very interesting hemshich. It's a relatively big hemshich for the Rebbe's Mamarim, four Mamarim. Very geschmacke hemshich. I would say mamish. It's definitely shvu. It's one of the longest and most geschmacke hemshich. Very geschmacke hemshich. Very oisius. Each Inyan is a fierech musber more than usual. Very geschmacke binyan. And the Maschil is very interesting. Lehavin, Inyan, Nesinas, Atayral, and Neshamas Yisrael dafke. See the ringer in the back. It's very interesting. They have the Yuman, page 676, from Kovetz and Resources. Kovetz and Resources was from the Rebbe's first publications. Right, Hayem Yoim the Rebbe printed in Tafshin Gimel. Kovetz and Resources, I believe, started Tafshin Dalid. It went on for a few years. Tafshin Dalid, Tafshin Hey, Tafshin Vav. That was the Chabad periodical sort of news / Torah / whatever the messages that Rebbe and Friedrich want to give out. So it went on for a few years, and then it stopped, and then they tried to boost it and restart it after the Rebbe's Nesiya started, and then it went for about a year, Tafshin Tezvav, Tafshin Tezayin, and then it stopped. Then already it evolved. Later was Bitaon Chabad, Kerem Chabad, later Kfar Chabad, and Chol Beis Chayenu. That's for that's a Shiur of its own. But either way, the vart is that these there's a few Kovetz and Resources that came out during the Rebbe's Nesiya. So there's talk about 4 or 5 Kovetzim issues that came out during those couple of years, and the Rebbe looked it over. I think some of these Inyan, you see the Rebbe's Hagoyas, and here it's a Yuman, what's going on by the Rebbe's Farbrengen. And it's mugid. It's a mugid yuman. You don't have so many of those. Like there's mugid yechidus. Mugid yuman is a nekuda. You know, it's like the Rebbe sort of allows, and sometimes the Rebbe was even magia things in the way that they wrote in the yuman. So here they're metayr, the maimer, 76 and 77. You see, there's a tier of the maimer, the leil shavuos maimer. And then on Shavuos itself, there were 2 mamarim, right? Which was always a chiddush, but especially in the early years, it was Yitzim Nechlal, to be 2 mamarim. The second maimer was Bekesher. He brings it was Bekesher to after the Rebbe sent the Shluchim to Eretz Yisrael, like I spoke about last week. At Behemshich to the tragedy that happened on Shiur, the other Chamisha. So the Rebbe said another maimer. But here is a tier of the Maimer, the Olam is waiting for the Maimer. You have it here in the bolder letters. Abazun der Urzach hat gehalten dem Greisen Olam wachsam und munter. If you understood half of this line, you're already ahead of the pack. Goiver Zayendik die Midkeit von der Speter Shah. Kids, there was something special that was keeping the Olam awake. Even though Tikkun Lo Shavuos, before that he says that these guys are sitting and saying Psukim of Tanakh. These guys are in and Zinta Nigan. Very geschmack, a very interesting tier over there. Very colorful. But something that was keeping everyone up was knowing that even though it was late, das ist der Matan Teira Maimer was Kodesh Zanmershli da sagt die erste Nacht Shavuos Fartag bekadrusa de Tzafra. The Maimer Matan Teira, that's what it was called. It was called Maimer Matan Teira, the Leil Shavuos Maimer. That was said the first night of Shavuos, Kadrusa de Tzafra, which is the time that Chazal say is when the Eibusher gave us the Torah, early morning. So that kept people up. That was the highlight, right? The Seder started, I believe, Shavuos Tafshin Yud Beis, and it went on as long as the Rebbe was eating the meals upstairs. So it went through Tafshin Lamed, right? That's when the Suda stopped. That's when the Yom Tov Farbrengen stopped. The Seder was in the Yud and Chavs, the Rebbe Farbrengen the second day of Shavuos. It was for bringing in the Sukkah. The second night of Pesach after the Seder, and the first and Leil Shavuos, the first night of Shavuos was a maimer, a special maimer. Then once the Rebbe started eating upstairs, so all of them stopped. And it's interesting. I don't think the Rebbe officially acknowledged it this way, but what happened over the next year or two was that things were moved up. So the Rebbe started for bringing Yud Gimel Tishrei, and that was almost like a compensation for the bringing of Sukkot. The Yud Aleph Nissen Farbrengen started then, and then a few years later the Yud Gimel Nissen Farbrengen, which with the Dibur Maschil is usually about Pesach and the Teichen of the Sichos. And Shavuos started being a Farbrengen Leil Erev Chag Shavuos. The night before Shavuos was a Farbrengen. So all the years, even before that, even in the Yud and Chavs as well, there was a Sicha the night before Shavuos, because they would come. I believe it was in the Rebbe's room. I guess a minyan or some chabura came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would say a Sicha, a Hadrin on Saita. The Rebbe said a Hadrin on Saita every single year. So there's like 40 Hadranim there on Saita. Now it's all derech klal on the same Mishmeis Rebbe, Mishmeis Batla, Midas Chet, and sometimes it goes to the sugya a bit before and after, but it's mamish lefiyerach around the same musagim, and yet there yard nocha kneich and nocha. But then once the Farbrengen started, then it stopped being a sicha in the room, and then one of the sichas by the Farbrengen, then it would speak about Seder. And then they would say the Maimer of the Maimers that happened then, the Maimer of Kabbalah Satira. But this was a very unique experience. It started off in Yud Beis. The Rebbe came down, I think later than later years. After that, it became kavua around 3 o'clock. But the first year was like after 4. The Rebbe, I even went to the mikveh, came back. The Rebbe came in and asked, "Where's the Eilo?" So no one's expecting anything. I think maybe that's Mach Tzedek had a similar anhaga to do Mamorim Lil, like time of Matan Torah. It wasn't all the Rebbe. So they told the Rebbe that the Eilim's in the mikveh. So the Rebbe asked, "Who's Yael?" So they said, "Yael's Charos in the mikveh." The Rebbe said, "No." The Rebbe started. The Rebbe said the Maimer. Meanwhile, the news came to the mikveh, and everyone came running. And then after that, so later, the Rebbe asked, I think it was after Shavuos, the Rebbe asked, what was the Seder? So they told the Rebbe that right after they did Chazara. Who did Chazara? Yael wasn't there. Right away he came, they told the Rebbe. And then they Chazer, then the Rebbe asked, what about those that weren't there? So the Rebbe said, so they told the Rebbe that they Chazer the next day. And then later, so the Rebbe said, Traimal Chazar Nish Media Given. I only hear bad news. Why such a good absurd? Why wasn't they told? So that's the way it started. And then it became a Seder every year. It was like a special musig. The Rebbe would come in. I'm not sure if always, but Derech Klal, the Maimer started with Adonigan. Like the Rebbe would come in, put on the mitpachas, and the Rebbe would then leave. The Maimer would be around 45 minutes. The Rebbe would then leave. I think with still on his hands. And I'm not sure if always, but I think the Derech Klal, it wasn't a Nigan Maimer. It was a Maimer like a Matan Torah. They would come down, say a Maimer, and leave. Interesting that Memtes. Leil Erev Shavuos, which was better the last Maimer, Benigan Maimer, right? Benigan Maimer that I said. So it was a Noichi. It also started without a Nigan before. Matzahzu, which was like a Chiddush, the first time in 3.5 years that ever said a Maimer, Benigan Maimer was with a Nigan before. They ever said the Nigan. Yeah, like they was all confused saying the Nigan. But a Noichi was a Noichi V'Alikach. It was without a Nigan before. So you have this like Matan Torah Nigan was without a Nigan before. Anyway, so here. So the Seder was many Shavuos Mamarim you see with the Yud and the Chavs when this was here. So there'd be a shtikol hemshich, the night of Shavuos and then the second day of Shavuos, and sometimes it would be a mamshich. But here there were 2 Mamarim on Shavuos itself, on the second day of Shavuos by the Farbrengen. So there's 3 Mamarim of Shavuos, and then another Maimer of Shlach is also a hemshich. So you have a shtikol hemshich over here. The toichen of the Maimers, you don't need to search with a flashlight and with a comb. It's in the Dibur Maschil. Lehavin, Inyan, Nesinas, Atayr, and Neshamas Yisrael down. It's very interesting. The Dibur Maschil Aβtzon goes on because it's not a pasuk. So where does the Dibur Maschil finish? So the Dibur Maschil is like 5 lines, and it's very good. Lehavin, Nesinas, Atayr, and Neshamas Yisrael dafke. Neshamas Yisrael, and so it's Atzmo and K'may Shem Lubashim begufim dafke. Neshamas begufim Atzmo and K'may Shem Lamata dafke. And yeah, the way it's dalamat. Oh, and bezeh gufa, and then bezeh gufa. It's not that David didn't take the neshamas and bring them l'mayla. He came down to us dalamata. Right? What's going on? Why did the Eibishter choose the neshamas? So the nekuda why Matan Torah down here. So this you'll find in Aribuyim, Amarim, and Sichis. The Chiddush of Matan Torah. Why Matan Torah was down here? right? Everyone knows from the youngest age, bar mitzvah, right? With the warning not to chazer on talucha, together with how the Yidden are able to sleep the night, or not sleep. Fine. What's the mahalach here? What's the vart over here? So it's interesting. Mitzad echad, the Maimer has one nikud it's trying to say. Mitzad sheni, there seems to be different phases, and every sifr to it seems to make sense, but then it will gain tiffer. So that's what we have to understand. What the question is in each law. We'll try to get through as many shlavim as we can. Like what's missing in the previous law, and what are we mechadish, and what's the shayla, and what are we mechadish in the next law? Because a lot of the Maimer seems like it's going. It's like Geshmak Oasis and Inyan, but like it seems it's going in circles and saying the same thing. So why is it given? So the approach we take over here is, why are we giving the Torah to neshamas? Why not to the malachim? So what's the nekudas advarim that he says here? And right there, this nekudah comes across in many different ways. What's the mahalach? This is mahalach, right? That the neshama is a mahalach. The malachim are oimdim, and the neshama is a mahalach. Okay, so what? So what? So because the neshama is greater, it gets something greater, right? In other words, in other places we say the malachim said that. The malachim said, we're better, we're greater. What's the bar mitzvah? Bar mitzvah is the oisis and nidler. It's the nkud that's brought in Chassidus a lot. That be'etzem the malachim are closer, and the yidden are further, but the tachlis is dolamata. Right. So then we're not looking for a maila in the neshamas Yisrael. Fakert, there is no maila. There is no maila. They're taka lower, and Elam Hazeh is lower. The kavan is near b'tachtoinim, and tachtoinim dafke. It's dafke dolamata. But here we're taking a different malach. We're looking for a maila of neshamas Yisrael. Now, towards the end of the maimer, we're also going to get to dir b'tachtoinim, but it's a different nekuda. Dir b'tachtoinim is here to explain what makes the neshamas mehalchim. Right? It's important. Nekuda chiluk, the first chiluk, or what makes this maimer unique. It's different than many other places. I'm not saying it's the only place, but the regular mahalach, you'll know from many mamarim, mugiv mamarim, sichas, is farker. We're not looking for a mile down here. The whole Adgasha is, the obvious was reichis hayu. Anu shemen turak shmecha. Dafke neshama. Dafke would come dolamata. The guf, the Bahamis, the Olam Hazeh Agashmi. The Torah comes down here because that's what the Kavanas has was dafke. Vas mer tacht in kol gleiber you're the mata yoiser. But here, no. Here we're saying, why were we the ones that are zoicha? In other words, why dafka us? And then it could is because yidin neshamis are bli gvul. Neshamis are bli gvul, and malachim are oimd. Malachim are oimd. Okay, so now, the first is Sif Beis. Basically, he goes through the Inyan of Malachim, and he takes that Malachim, there's many different dargis, or they're Shoirish, and Shoirish Sharsham, v'chol. But Sof, wherever you go, wherever you see, wherever you look, you see Gvul. Tifre Gvul, Dakostik Gvul, but Gvul. So there's an interesting line over here. Says, okay, so on page 27, right, so he's going through the Akbala in Bria, there's also Akbala in Atzilus, right, you started the Maimer, you're in the middle of the Maimer, you started, where are you, you got this base, Gimel, okay. And then the Spheris, there's the Inyan of Akbala, Hecher from Atzilus, there's the Inyan of Akbala. And then even higher than Kav Amidas in Akbala, that's the Hashara in Atzvos. So even Kredim at Simtsum, there's the Musik of the Glifu, the Hashara, the Koyach HaGvul. So he says, Zeu Hatam, the line starts, Zeu Shoirish Kol HaAkbalas. Right? It's a bit after the halfway point. Zeu Shoirish Kol HaAkbalas, the fourth word. Zeu Hatam, Sha'Akbala Sheb Malachim, Hi Akbala G'dayla B'yoyser Kanal. This is why the Hagbala in the Malachim is a Meiradika Hagbala. Why? Because the Sheirish Hagbala is Melamayla Metzilis. Melamayla Yeser Kecha Gvol Shebein Sev Kedem Atzin. Come on, Hagbala. He's saying the Hagbala of the Malachim, not Stam Hagbala, it's Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser. Why is Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser? So something very interesting. Because on one hand, in this sif, we're going in through Dargis of Hagbala, right? Now, let's say start either from the bottom up or top down. Let's say he starts at Hagbala that's in Biyah, Atzilis, the Spheris, the Kav, and Koidem Atzimtzum. In each stage, where is there a bigger Hagbala and where is there a smaller Hagbala? The Pashas without any major oimek. There's a bigger Hagbala in Atzilis or in Biyah?
Bigger than what?
Doesn't want to get full. Where's there a bigger Hagbala? Is what? I'm saying, what am I asking? What I'm asking is, that's what I'm asking is, why, or how do we come and say after the whole Varg, we're saying, Nacher is Hagbala, and there also is Hagbala, of Mele Kumta Reis, that it's Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser. If the Hagbala of the Malachim was mitzad Hagbala of Bria, or even Atzil is okay. But if the Hagbala of the Malachim is mitzad Hagbala in Keich HaGvul, of Kedem HaTzimtzum, which you do at Keich HaGvul is the Chiskalel and is part of the Bligvul. So what's the Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser? For care, it's showing that even though it's a very dakustik Hagbala, it's episode. So I'm saying so. So is it fart? Is it only fart? Is it fart the Hagbala or it's a echte Hagbala? Yeah. Is it the Hagbala? It's the Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser, or is it? It's a line later, right? Yeah. Why? But it's the same sentence. Why is it Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser? Because the Sherish Hagbala is al Ma'ila Me'atzilus, al Ma'ila Yeser Kech, al Mekom Kamer Yeser Hagbala. So it's Hagbala Ktana B'Yeser, not Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser. What were you saying? So what makes that Hagbala G'dayla B'Yeser?
It's very big, but Lachal is not generous Hagbala.
Generous Hagbala.
There was a line before.
Because what is Mugbal too is Godel. It's not Mugbal to something small, it's Mugbal to something bigger.
Yeah,
it's much Mugbal.
Yeah, that's okay. That's a very generous Hagbala.
Chach is Mugbal to a higher level. It's not Mugbal to something small. It's interesting logic.
Okay, so first of all, I have to see the original Hanoch and also I can hear it. I was thinking a shtickle under of it, but okay, Ken Zayn. I wasn't thinking that Hagbala G'dayla. The way he was trying to say it. No, I was thinking you could say a different nekuda. That what we're trying to say is that Einachanami, the higher you go, the more dakustik the Hagbala is, yeah? But the idach, wie heich wirst du gehen? Wirst du treffen Hagbala. Meaning there's no shoyresh, but okay, right now here he's mugbal. But go to the shoyresh, and go to the shoyresh, stuff at some stage you'll hit bligvul. So v'meile, so the Hagbala, it's not a atzmistika Hagbala. It's not a mugbal be'etzem. It's mugbal by circumstance. It's mugbal beratzin. Down here, because of the tzimtzum, it's mugbal. Because of the kav, it's the maimer kavamida. The kav is made because in Atzilus first there's a musig of yesh and that's also therefore there's Hagbala. Because in biyah, right? It's because of circum, because of its place as Hagbala. But be'etzem, the nivra is blikvul. Elamai. So we're saying, wie heich wirst du gehen? What's his first shayresh? Even koidem atzimtzum, was his alts bligvul? But even there it's koyach. Even there it's koyach gvul. So even you'll get to its first sharshay erishin is be'etzem mugbal. So the Hagbala is inherent. Kol inyana is Hagbala. Mashenk in the Shamas Yisrael, Mashenk in the Yid, with Hagbala is all down here, but be'etzem a Yid, because he's machshavas, or Nochech later on in the Maimon he's not only machshavah, the Ratzin apnimi. So the Neshama Saf comes from a place that's bligvul, even if the Olamat there is mugbal, but be'etzem he is shaykh to bligvul. Huh? I'm never cooking in the Hanacha, how it's written. I think it's also one of the words here, Gdela. Right. That also later on you see that towards the end of the Sif, 5-6 times before, that why Haishak Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's like that name Sarfam. The cave on Shashar Shom Yikecha Gvul Shebein Soif Hare Kol Mitziyusum Hu Bagbala. Right. Or, why do you have to go all the way back to the? Because that's the whole vart. Because Be'etzem at the highest place, at their first Shoirish, they come from Kecha Gvul. So everything about them is Hagbala. Over Melo, the moment they get something that's L'mayla Me'agbalasa, they're totally nispatel. Why? Because Kol Gidram is Hagbala. Because that's their source. Their source is Koyach HaGvul. That's their first place. Okay. Efshernit. Okay, but now...
Before he's talking about the target, not about the Sheish Malach.
Huh?
Before, he says that
Yeah.
he's talking about the target itself, not the fact that the Sheish Malach is... he's talking about the target of the Sheish, not the fact that the Malach come from Sheish.
Okay, now he goes into Sif Gimel, and we're asking, okay, the Neshamis are also Behagbala. Fine. So he answers, if you're saying that they're Gvul and the Neshamis are Bli Gvul. Neshamis are Bli Gvul. So therefore we give it to the Mahalach and not to the Oim. Perhaps to the Shaila, if the Vart is Mitzad, what makes something Mugbal? You could be moving. Neshamis move, Malachim move around, they're not static. Chai Hashem, Shemad L'fon, I'm saying the Neshamis, the Malachim have an Avodah. Midah means that it's within certain parameters, within certain Akbala, there's no Bli Gvul. Saying the Neshamis are Bli Gvul. The Shaila, the Neshamis are also Mugbal. It's Taka they're Alikos, but it's Alikos, Nasa Nivra, it's V'chelik Nivdo. And therefore we see elsewhere they're also called Oimdim. So what's the beer? The beer is Einachanami, right? At least the way we say it in Sifgimel, Einachanami. Aber something unique that Neshamis have is Chibur Beis Havchim. And Chibur Beis Havchim creates Mahalach, it's Mamshech Koyach Einsei. It's Mamshech Koyach Einsei. So we have something, so they get within themselves an energy that's Taka Blig. Okay, well, so we'll get back to that itself, but first, okay. So the Vart of Sif Gimel is that Taka Yidin are Mugbal, they're not Bligvul, Shamas are Mugbal, but because there's Shama and Guf, which are Hafchim, that creates a Bligvul energy. But then right there's a few places, let's see Sif Dalit. Right, where he comes to, whatever he's coming to explain there, I'm going to get to later because I don't want to be available right now. But when he starts actually explaining what's the hafchias of the neshama and guf, he says, what's neshama? So he says that neshama is all over machshava, and that's the ma'ila. What's the ma'ila of neshamas over malachim? Neshamas are machshava, and malachim come from dibur. Okay, weiter, later than page 29. A few lines from the end. This he's a yuvan hafresh ben kol nivroim v'malachim v'neshamis. That the nivroim and malachim, everything other than neshamis, come from dibur, and because dibur is hamshacha, harehem mugbal in kfiyef in hamshacha. 5 lines from the bottom. On the misra in neshamis she'alu b'machshava shemachshavi la'artz me'ereim b'ligvul. Right? He goes on a whole arichas, and then the next few lines, many times. Especially if you say that it comes, Shavit Meda'ak, etc., etc. Next page, Bevadash HaNeshama is unbelievable, and that's what's the big chiddush of the. In order to explain to us, in Sif Gimel he says that the neshamas themselves are mugbal, they're not bleakful, right? So how do they become bleakful? Because they're mechaber hafchim. Because then down here it's the chibur hafchim. What's the chibur hafchim? Neshama and guf. What makes the neshama and guf hafchim? Explain the Sif Dalid, because what's the hafchias? The neshama is bli gvul, and the guf is achtachas gvul, and the chibur of bli gvul and gvul is chibur hafchim. One second. But if the neshama is bli gvul, I don't need the vart of chibur havchim. The whole reason I have to come to chibur havchim because the neshama is not bli gvul, because the neshama is gvul. Elamai, but it's not really bli gvul, so we need to be mechaber havchim. What makes it chibur havchim? Because it's bli gvul. One second. But you're saying that it's not bli gvul. So if it's not bli gvul, then it's not chibur havchim. Right? It's still catch 22. So, right, which way are you going? Oh, the pashtus. The pashtus. The havana is that what was mered do in Sif Dalid is within the neshames and guf. The neshames within the gather of nivroim. That's even harder than nivroim. The neshames within the gather of this world, the greatest, the most bleak vul. Right? There's bleak vul. There's relative bleak. The most bleak vul in Inyan is neshames. The lowest Inyan is the gufa adam, which is made out of the four yisoides. And it was created without the neshama coming along with it, so it's tachlin on its own. And then we bring the two together. And that's what Kudi is saying here, that within the context, I don't call it Olam Hazik, we're talking about Neshama here, but within the Gdorim of Nivroim, the highest Nivra that exists is the Neshama, which is Alikus Nasa Nivra, which is Bligvul, and the lowest Nivra is Guf Adam. Adam Nivra Minol Yoyin Min HaTachtoin. But in Sif Gimel is that for Mehalich that wouldn't be enough. Because Sof, you're calling it Bli Gvul, but because at the end of the day, this Neshama is a Likus Shenasa Nivra, right? There's a gather of Nivra here, so it's Fart. Fart has its Akbalah, it has its Akdaris. Right, which therefore you're going to say, where does the Neshama start from? Vas Hecher Vestugay, how hard you're going to go. So even the way he says in the Sivdal, you'll go to Machshava, then you'll go to Machshava Gdum Da'ak, B'chulu. That's far. It's some level of call it gvul or geder, but there's something there. It's interesting. The highest level he goes to the neshama is machshava dumedaak. When he speaks about the malachim, eret vegin kecha gvul kedem atzimtzum. Fine. The embassy says that sometimes ak is also brought as kedem atzimtzum. It's together with the glifu and it could be. I don't have to get into the kabbalah, but. I'm trying to bring out that in the Kud. That be'etzem, in other words, when you break it down into the dargis, you realize that also the neshama has a certain level of gvul here. So to be a mahalich, we need to come to the varta of the chibur havchim. But then he's saying the yakas to bring out what makes it a chibur havchim. He says the bli gvul, which is relative to the relative to the gvul. The bli gvul is misachid with the gvul of the guf. Now, when we get from Sif Gimel to Sif Dalid. So we spoke about the difference of the levels of bleak vul, but what's the difference in the vart, right? Because the sifim here, like three sifim here, that end up they finish off with the same vart. Let's say in sif beis, the two ktoy and nishamis are called mahalchim and bleak vul, and then the end of the sif beis, nishamis are bleak vul and they're called mahalchim. Sif gimel finishes off through coming down to the units neshama beguf. It's chibur beis havchim, so it becomes a mahalch because there's amshachas kayach ein seif. And then Sif Dalid, we ask, but why? What's the reason that Koyach Ein Soif is Nimshach in the Neshama when it slapshes the Guf? All we know, Mashla now, all we see is that Azayis the Metzias, that Chibur Beis Havchim, Bert Nimshach as Koyach Ein Soif. But what's the reason for it? Okay, how did you understand the first statement, the Inyan of Nimshach as Koyach Ein Soif in Sif Gimel? What's the question in Sif Dalid, and what are we answering? He ends up saying, you went through Sif Gimel and Dalid? What's the shinoi? What's the difference between Sif Gimel and Dalid? It seems like you ask the question and gives the same answer.
Here in Sif Gimel, he wasn't married what's the Havchim? Sif Dalid how much of Havchim it is, but it's not how
But he doesn't answer the question. He's not answering the question. What's the question? What's being answered? What did we say in Sif Gimel? What's he asking and what are we answering? So we can track that. A similar thing was also going to be what's the question in Sif Hey and what's being answered there. I don't know if we'll get to that. I'll try to get to that as well. But let's first see what's happening. There's a lot of Adin Tzarech Lehavin here. So the Chayyur is saying like this. Let's leave the Neshama and go. Let's make a Chesed Gvur Tiferes. Or even on a more basic level in colors. Right? So you have red and blue. What happens when you put red and blue together? Purple. Yeah? Let's go learn physics. Right? So when you put two ingredients together, it creates something special, something different, right? And we call it tiferes. That's beauty. What's beauty? Beauty is, we also had it, which maamer was it about? Yefas toyar, yefas mara. Per maamer. So what creates beauty? What's tiferes? Beauty is, right, you see a tapestry, you see something beautiful, you see a few things, colors come together, people come together. Tiferes in personality. What's the tiferes personality? Chesed and gvura. Some people are more, folk, they're just one, they're very mugbal. Then there's people that are more flexible and they're more fluid. So you see a chibur over here. So b'pashtos, how does beauty? So what creates beauty? So b'pashtos, beauty comes from the chibur of two hafchim. You put two colors together, they make something beautiful. You bring two personalities together. You bring ish ve'isha together. It creates something. It creates a beautiful thing. That's with pashtus. But b'oimek yoser, tiferes is not just a chibur. It's not just a chesed and gvura came together. The yatsa egel hazeh. Yatsa is hoil basar echad, and now you have the vlad. Now you have the tiferes. B'pnimis inyanim it's verkehrt. How can chesed and gvura work together? How is it possible? How can they come together? Chesed does a chesed, gvura is gvura. How do you take red and blue? How do you take two people? How do you put these two together? How is it possible? The answer, there's something called tiferes. Because if not, why do you need tiferes? Have chesed and gvura and bring them together. Make a shidduch. You don't need a third guy. I bring a shadchan though. Who needs tiferes? Why do you need a third sphere? Netzach has its own personality. Hoy has its personality. What's tiferes' personality? Chibur chesed and gvura. So just put chesed, make chesed gvura, gvura sheba chesed. It's all great. Where were we now? Speak to your local Orthodox rabbi on that one. What's the answer? The answer is verkehrt. There's something called tiferes. Tiferes oile ada keser. Tiferes is a koyach bli gvul. This koyach bli gvul, and that's what beauty is. Beauty is not. There's some. The musik of beauty. Beauty is what's beauty? It's a murder gezach. It's gewaldig. Why is it gewaldig? Not because chesed and gvura were nischaber. Because it's a gili of atzmus. It's not only oilad the keser. It's oilad what's it called? Tiferes hanelam, right? But tiferes at its core is etzem alein, right? Which enables everything to be nischaber. So tiferes is this energy. It's this amazing, powerful, majestic energy. Uvemela, it's so majestic that it brings the colors together. And when the colors come together, you're seeing a bitui of this majesty. So in other words, like this. So let's go in our OECS, in Sif Gimel. In Sif Gimel, we're saying, okay, how does that happen? How does that happen? Yeah, so we're seeing the mashal. We're speaking sort of from the bottom. We're saying from the facts. What we see that a Shama and Go come together. We see Zachar and Kovetz and Resources come together. Each one on their own is mugbal. When they come together, they bring koyach ein soif into this world. So what brings the koyach ein soif? So we look at it and say, look, because he's chesed, she's gvura, tchar nukve. Bring them together, and look what happens. They bring the coming together, the synergy of the two energies together creates unbelievable koyach ein soif. That comes in koyach elada. Is that really what happens? So people say, then I'm going to ask, this question is Dalid. 1 second. Okay, I know that. I know that when two people get married, unbelievable things happen. And they could create, with koyach ein soif, that no other nivra has. That's what I see happening. But how does that happen? And when we start understanding how, we realize that it flips. It's not that when the two come together, the two opposites come together, they create koyach ein soif. It's verkehrt. How can the two come together? Why taka could the Zachar and Nekeva come together? Because of ein soif. Right? Tiferes, not that Chesed and Gevurah together bring Tiferes. Tiferes brings Chesed and Gevurah together. There's Koyach Ein Sof. And the Koyach Ein Sof allows two Inyanim Havchim to go out of their Gdarim and come together, and then it's Mispate in Gili, Koyach Ein Sof Lamato. But Koyach Ein Sof, the Gili, what we see down here is we see the Bitoy of the Ein Sof that comes through the Chibur. But really it's Farkeret. What enables the Chibur? How can the Chibur happen? Through the cause of the Koyach Ein Sof. Right, and that's what he's saying over here. The Be'etzem, the Taka we're in Gansin Hafchiyim, B'siachdim and B'yichud Gamor, Eich Efsher, the end of the Sivdal, Eich Efsher Liyas Yichud the Beis Hafchim, Zodaf Gedi Koyach HaMafli Lasis, and Bechamer Beis Hafchim. Sivdal, we're saying the facts. When you come together, we see Ein Sof. Okay, but Pashta would say, okay, you bring two together, it creates a beautiful energy. We're saying, well, how can you bring them together? They're opposites. How can they work together? Because there's a koyach ein sof that's miyachid them, and then once they're miyuchid, they're megala. That koyach ein sof that was miyachid them is now miskala leinei basar. Right? It's not when we create a koyach ein sof. We're megala koyach ein sof that allowed us to be together, which is a very interesting vart. Stam, I'm Musger over here. He says people can't have kids. It's one of two reasons. The two reasons are hafchi. Or Chachsid is begging them that what's the yichacha that having children is from koyach ein sof? Because if not, everyone would have. But here you see certain people have no issues and they can't have kids. Why? Because they need koyach ein sof. But then Shar Gulgulim brings two nekudas here. One is that nefesh the nukva could be in the guf tchar, right? Because in order for the koyach ein sof, you need a chibur hafkin. But if the zachar is a nefesh of a nekeva, or the nekeva is a nefesh of a zachar, then there's no hafkin. So what's the solution to such a situation? Such people, they can never have kids. Maybe they'll have ibur, and the zachar will now get an ibur of a neshama of zachar, or the nekeva will have ibur and get a neshama of nekeva. That's the first one. The zweite nekuda is there has to be achdus, and heder achdus doesn't give the shachas ein sof. He's something very interesting. That we need, that in order to have, what holds back from having children is one of two opposite things. Either the zachar is not a zachar, either they're not hafchim, or mela they can't have children, or they're not be'achdus, so they can't have children, right? Which is that. Thus is ganz teira shalom bayis for whenever it's relevant. First, it has to be hafchim. The zachar darf sein a zachar. Zachar darf sein a zachar, and the nekeva darf sein a nekeva. Without that, there can't be a relationship. There can't be a marriage. But then if the zachar bleibt the zachar and bleibt the nekeva, and there's no achdus, then weiter doesn't work. Yes. But the koyach ein sof only exists. But the koyach ein sof is only in the skala when you're hafchim. How could you have Avtzon if the koyach ein sof is not there yet? You have to have Avtzon, and then afterwards the koyach. Ish v'isha zachu shchina shrei b'nei. It's only for the gili. They have that before. Right. The fact that the ish v'isha could have a child is because of the koyach ein sof. It's because of the koyach ein sof. But then the shaila is what's going on in Sifhei, and what's the answer there? Fine. So that's going to be together with the question of what we left off from that. And that's Maimer, so we'll make a hashlama